The parking lot was nearly empty, save for a few scattered cars and a lone figure moving slowly between them. Under the dim glow of the streetlights, an elderly man, hunched with age, pushed a long line of shopping carts toward the front of a grocery store. His movements were slow, deliberate, as if every step required effort. Inside a nearby Tesla, its sleek black frame blending into the night, Elon Musk sat quietly, observing. He had just stopped by to grab a quick snack on his way home, but something about the old man caught his attention. The frail figure, bundled up in an oversized jacket, shivered against the cold as he struggled to guide the heavy carts into place. It was clear this wasn't just a routine job, it was survival. Elon's mind raced. A billionaire, a visionary, a man who had revolutionized industries, and yet here, in front of him, was a 90-year-old man who should be enjoying his twilight. Years, but instead was working late at night, likely just to put food on the table. He stepped out of his car, the soft thud of the door closing barely audible over the hum of the nearby street. As he approached, the old man looked up, his weathered face marked by deep lines, a testament to decades of hard work and hardship. "Need a hand?" Elon asked, his voice breaking the silence. The old man chuckled, shaking his head. "I've been doing this longer than you've been alive, son, but I appreciate the offer." Elon studied him for a moment. There was pride in his voice, a stubborn determination that refused to bow to age or circumstance. But beneath that, there was exhaustion, the kind that doesn't just come from a long shift, but from a lifetime of struggle. "What's your name?" Elon asked. "Frank," the man replied, gripping the metal cart tightly as he adjusted his stance. Elon nodded. "Frank, why are you still doing this? At your age, you should be relaxing, spending time with family." Frank let out a sigh, his breath visible in the cool night air. "Wish I could, but life doesn't always go the way you plan. Wife passed a few years back. Bills kept coming. Social Security barely covers anything. So here I am, making ends meet the best I can." Elon felt a tightness in his chest. The wealth gap, the struggles of everyday people. He had always been aware of it, but seeing it firsthand like this was different. He reached into his pocket, pulling out his phone. "Frank, what if I told you that you don't have to do this anymore?" The old man raised an eyebrow. "And how's that?" Elon tapped his screen a few times, then looked back up. "Because I just wired enough money to your account that you never have to push another cart again." Frank froze. His grip on the cart tightened as if he was grounding himself in reality, making sure he wasn't dreaming. What are you saying?" "I'm saying," Elon continued, "that you've worked hard enough. You've done your part. Now it's time for someone else to take care of you." Tears welled up in Frank's eyes, but he quickly wiped them away. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Elon said with a small smile. "Just promise me one thing. Spend the rest of your days doing what makes you happy." Frank's hands trembled, not from the cold this time, but from the overwhelming weight of relief. He had spent decades scraping by, never expecting a miracle. But tonight, under the glow of the streetlights, his life changed forever. As Elon walked back to his car, he glanced over his shoulder one last time. Frank was still standing there, staring at his phone, disbelief painted across his face. Elon Musk had done many incredible things in his life, sending rockets to space, revolutionizing transportation, pushing the boundaries of human innovation. But in that moment, none of it compared to the simple act of kindness that had just unfolded. Driving away, he couldn't help but think. Sometimes changing the world doesn't mean building the future. Sometimes it just means making sure someone doesn't have to push carts at 90 years old. As Elon's Tesla glided smoothly onto the highway, his mind lingered on Frank. He had seen countless stories of hardship, had read statistics about retirees struggling to survive, but this was different. This was personal. It wasn't just numbers on a spreadsheet. It was a man who had given everything to society, only to be left behind in his later years. He tapped his fingers against the steering wheel, deep in thought. The world was evolving. Technology was advancing at a breakneck pace. But how many Franks were out there, unseen, unnoticed? He had always believed in building a better future, but what about the people who had built the past? His phone buzzed on the center console. It was his assistant, responding to the transfer he had made. Assistant, are you sure about this? It's a significant amount. Elon smirked slightly, shaking his head as he voice commanded a reply. Elon, absolutely. In fact, find out if he has any family, any medical needs, anything else we can do. As he pulled into his driveway, the weight of the moment still sat heavy on him. This wasn't just a one-time gesture, it was a wake-up call. Maybe there was more he could do, something bigger than just one act of kindness. The next morning, before heading into work, he made a few calls. He reached out to his team, discussing ideas, brainstorming ways to address financial struggles for elderly individuals who had worked hard their entire lives but were now barely scraping by. Universal basic income had always been a topic he toyed with. But perhaps there was another way. A foundation, a support system, something designed specifically for people like Frank. Meanwhile, Frank was still processing what had happened. He had barely slept, his mind racing with emotions. That morning, he walked into the grocery store, not as an employee, but simply as a customer. The store manager, a younger man who had known Frank for years, was stunned to see him out of uniform. Frank? What's going on? Frank chuckled, shaking his head. Would you believe me if I told you a billionaire just changed my life? The story quickly spread, first around the store, then around the community. News outlets picked it up, people shared it on social media, and before long, it became a viral sensation. Elon Musk rescues 90-year-old worker from poverty. Elon Musk's unexpected act of kindness shocks the internet. But for Elon, it wasn't about the headlines. It wasn't about the praise. It was about the realization that with great wealth and power comes the ability, no, the responsibility, to make real, tangible change. In the days that followed, Frank found himself flooded with support. Strangers reached out, some offering friendship, others inspired to help those in their own communities. It was as if a single act of kindness had ignited something far greater. Elon, however, wasn't done. He met with financial experts, social advocates, and economists to explore new initiatives, ways to ensure that no one in their later years would have to push carts just to survive. It wouldn't happen overnight, and it wouldn't be easy, but the seed had been planted. A few weeks later, Frank received a letter in the mail. It was from Musk's office. Inside was a simple message. Enjoy the rest of your life. You've earned it. Tears filled his eyes as he sat on his small porch, feeling the sun on his face, truly at peace for the first time in years. And as for Elon, he simply continued forward as he always had. Pushing boundaries, chasing the future, but now with an even deeper understanding that sometimes the greatest impact isn't made in boardrooms or on launch pads. Sometimes it's made in the quiet moments, in a grocery store parking lot, with an old man just trying to make it through the night. Days passed, but the story didn't fade. News outlets continued covering it, social media buzzed with discussions, and people around the world started sharing similar stories. Elderly workers struggling to survive in what should have been their golden years. Elon didn't seek the attention, but he couldn't ignore the ripple effect. He knew that one act of kindness wasn't enough to change the system, but it was enough to start a conversation. And sometimes conversations led to revolutions. At Tesla's headquarters, he gathered a small team of advisors. How many Franks are out there? He asked, leaning forward in his chair. How many people have given everything to society only to be left behind? One of his team members pulled up statistics. Millions, Elon. Retirement savings aren't enough for most people, especially with rising costs. Many seniors are forced to keep working, even in exhausting jobs, just to pay for food, medicine, and rent. Elon sat back, deep in thought. We've automated cars, we've built rockets, we've created AI, but we still haven't figured out how to take care of our elders. He tapped the table. Let's change that. Over the next few weeks, a new initiative began to take shape. A foundation, not just for charity, but for structural change. Elon didn't want temporary relief. He wanted a solution. He pledged a massive personal donation to kickstart a program aimed at supporting elderly workers, helping them transition out of unnecessary labor and into stable financial situations. But it wasn't just about money. He knew that real change required more than just handing out checks. He began working with economists, policymakers, and tech innovators to explore sustainable ways to provide long-term security for retirees. Ideas like supplemental income, affordable housing projects, and even AI-driven work alternatives for seniors who still wanted to contribute, but in ways that suited their capabilities. Meanwhile, Frank was still adjusting to his new reality. The grocery store had thrown him a retirement party, something he never expected. For the first time in decades, he woke up without the need to rush out the door. Instead, he spent his mornings reading, walking in the park, and reconnecting with old friends he had lost touch with over the years. One day, he received another call. It was from Elon's office. "Elon wants to know if you'd like to meet." Frank chuckled. "Didn't I already meet him?" "In a parking lot, yes," the assistant said, "but he wants to sit down and talk, if you're interested." A week later, Frank found himself in California, stepping into a sleek Tesla facility, feeling like he had entered another world. The technology, the energy, it was all so different from the quiet life he had known. And then, there was Elon. Dressed casually, just as he had been that night in the parking lot, but this time, in a different setting. Frank extended his hand. "Didn't think I'd be seeing you again, son." Elon smiled, shaking his hand. "I figured if I'm going to change the system, I should start by listening to the people who've lived through it." They talked for hours, about life, about struggles, about what it really meant to work hard and still feel like you're falling behind. Frank's experiences weren't unique, and that was the problem. By the end of their conversation, Elon had an even clearer vision. He wasn't just going to help Frank, he was going to help thousands, maybe even millions of Franks out there. A few months later, the Future Dignity Initiative was officially launched, a program aimed at ensuring that no elderly person would have to work out of desperation. It combined financial assistance, job transition support, and community-based solutions to give retirees the security they deserved. Frank became somewhat of an unexpected spokesperson for the movement. His story had inspired people, and Elon wanted to make sure that inspiration turned into action. The initiative gained traction. Other billionaires, business leaders, and even government officials took notice. Conversations about real retirement, reforms started happening in places where they had long been ignored. And Frank? He spent his days differently now. Not in a parking lot pushing carts, but traveling, sharing his story, and reminding people that no matter how advanced the world became, the true measure of progress wasn't just in technology, it was in how we treated those who had already given us so much. One evening, as he sat on his porch watching the sunset, his phone buzzed. A simple message from Elon. "Hope you're enjoying life, Frank. We're just getting started." Frank smiled, leaned back in his chair, and for the first time in a long time, felt like the world was finally moving in the right direction.